Hey everybody, I'm here with Varun Khurana from Wayfaster. Thanks, Varun, for taking the time. I'd love to hear a little bit about what Wayfaster does.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Wayfaster builds voice agents to automate the interview process, specifically around first and second round screens. So you can imagine a recruiter call you've done before where they ask you a checklist set of questions. We're using voice agents that think and sound like humans to automate those calls and process the data from there to make an evaluation on the candidate on whether they should move forward or not.
Very cool. So, tell me the origin story. What brought you to this idea?
Yeah, it's interesting. So both me and my co-founder had worked at companies that hire high volumes of people. So I was at Instacart, which is a gig economy company that hires, at the peak of COVID, almost 500,000 people a day. Trey was at Checker, which runs the background checks for Instacart, and I guess I was paying his paycheck in some way. They work with a bunch of staffing companies as well. And unfortunately, both those companies, while we were there during COVID, also hyper expanded and hired way too many people on corporate as well. Um, and so we knew there's a problem that as you kind of hire more and more people at high volumes, you have to scale your costs linearly. It's both time and money that required to actually interview hundreds of thousands of people. In addition, it's actually not even linear, it's more exponential because there's organizational overhead around scheduling and matching people with recruiters. And so it's very expensive. It's very costly. Couple interesting things happened last fall. Shrey was also the first engineer at DeepGram, which builds, they were pioneering the text to speech space. And so as we saw voice agents and foundation models get cognitively better, we realized, look, like we know about this problem. Now the tool is there to build like a 10x solution, and we kind of went after it from there.
That's awesome. So, this is the first company you guys have founded, right? You guys have worked at other companies, larger companies beforehand. What is some of the things that you've learned about starting a company from scratch after being part of these like massive organizations before?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because both me and Trey had short stints at like very early stage companies early on in our careers too. So we have seen the kind of like both of us have been like first, second employees at like early stage startups. So we saw the big company perspective. We also saw the like five people in a room just looking at each other, trying to figure out like what's going on. And a couple things you realize is one is like your people matter, right? Like you guys might be Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, but at the end of the day, like you only have so much leverage for yourselves. And so you have to hire a really, really great team to help build the next stage of the company. And part of that is really empowering those people to not just, do the work that is assigned to them, but let them kind of take the liberty of going and taking on large, hairy tasks and providing inputs and telling you that you're wrong. So that's been one of the key things. The other thing is just being really ruthless about your time. I think there's this inflection point where you have this cool demo and you're like begging people to kind of just like take a look at it. And then all of a sudden you have a real product that you're ready to send in market. And, that inflection point, if you're not ready for it, because you're used to just taking every single meeting and every single demo and talking to every person. And once you have a sellable product, you kind of realize I have to learn how to prioritize. I have to learn what matters, who's my ICP, and learning to say no, as much of a trope it is. It's so hard when you're just like, I just want to make more revenue, have more hiring goals. But it's a hard lesson to learn, and it's one that we've learned the hard way as well.
That makes sense. You guys are in a really interesting space. I think it's a clear problem that people have, but also we're starting to see a lot of other companies
Sure.
jump up, do the same thing. So, how do you think about this? How do you think about differentiating? How do you think about a market where there's a lot of entrants coming in?
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lot of companies coming in, but there's also a huge market. Like, if you think about the most narrow sliver of our market, I say is like the $770 billion staffing industry. And that's like the key addressable where you can just sell software right into it. But at the end of the day, we're not building a recruiting company, and we're building a way to tell for like the 2 billion employable professionals on earth, like what are they good at over a longitudinal time period and being able to match them with the right jobs. It's not just selling recruiting software. So we have a big vision for where we want to go with the company. I think when it comes to differentiation, one of the key things for us is just be making sure that our data and the set of features we're building for customers is compounding. It's not the same thing as everyone else, and we can really show the benefits of compounding data sets. I think when it comes to differentiation questions, I always say there's a VC answer, which is like the strength of our evaluation model and like our speed of execution. But the reality is like when you're at this stage of company, you just have to focus on the next milestone and be ruthless about it. And, you have to just see where the customer's taking you with the puck. How do I hit $2 million, $5 million, $10 million revenue? And then, I think it's almost like a war of attrition, where if you're still standing at $2 or $5 million of ARR, your path to kind of becoming a huge company becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I like just the idea of like just build something people want, like worry
Yeah.
about the moats and stuff down the line because you can't control all of it. What's one of the secrets that you've learned about being a founder or about the early days that no one really talks about?
Yeah. Look, like I think one of the hardest things is just like learning how to manage your emotions on a day-to-day basis, because you can get stuck in this trap, and me and Trey did for the first 6 months of the company, where when things aren't really going as well as you want to, like everyone pictures the Silicon Valley, like, Facebook version of startups where it's like everything's up and to the right and you're like kind of chasing growth and you're busy and you're like, you have these concrete goals. But the reality is like at the early days, like there's days where just shit doesn't happen. You try a bunch of stuff, it doesn't work. You're like, fuck. And then I think really it's about managing your emotional energy, not getting too caught up in asking these like existential questions about like, oh, what am I doing with my life? It's just saying, okay, this has failed. Let's move on to the next step. Let's brainstorm where we're going here. Let's give this a little bit more time. And just being super, super rational and level headed. And I think that's kind of the thing that's been really hard for us, because your inclination, as I think most founders, are like delusional type A people, which is a very interesting combination of traits. And I think the thing is just to keep pushing and like find the optimal solution. And the reality is like, I just don't think that works in startups, because emotionally you're going to be dead by the time you start to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think like a lot of founders, if you told them what it would be like in the first few months and stuff, they'd be like, "Yeah, I don't need to do this." Like,
Yeah.
it's tough. It's really hard to start a company, and I don't think like I think the highs are higher, but the lows are definitely lower too. I was going to ask this question later, but now that you've talked about it, it's like, do you have any secrets for yourself on how to maintain your sanity?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's look, like I think there's a couple things. It's me and Trey, it's both like we're super anal about being in the gym and like kind of working out every day, every other day. And that's like biggest stress release. And for me personally, it's like, keeping up with friends and family and like making sure that at least we take like half of Saturday off. And like, even if we're working Sundays, like you can't burn yourself out. It's all the typical things of like,
Sure.
maintaining a healthy lifestyle, being in the gym.
So talk to me a little bit about. So I want to back up a little bit and talk about. You guys are building your team now. You're starting to think about growing and stuff. Talk to me about the culture that you want to build at Wayfaster. Who are the types of people you want to hire? What are the types of behaviors you want to build at your company?
Yeah, I can talk about the culture, and then I can talk about kind of the types of people. And the types of people is the easier one to answer. Everyone mentions the, basic stuff like don't be an asshole, low ego, smart, hardworking. Me and Trey tell candidates, we're like, look, if you left in 18 months to go start a company, that would be the happiest day of our lives. We'd introduce you to all our investors, because it means that we hire the right people. You want people that are willing to take ownership, can kind of handle like very ambiguous tasks. For me, like what I've realized is the minute that you have to start micromanaging someone or like really looking at the day to day of their tasks at this early stage, when you yourself are being pulled in 14 different directions already, um, that's just, it's not going anywhere. You have to have people that can operate autonomously on like independent tasks. And, it's funny. I only have one rule of not hiring. Like I'm objectively opposed to hiring consultants. I have never seen a consultant that has actually done anything useful at any of the companies I've worked at. But I think culture wise, we work very hard. I think we're intense about working and like putting in long hours and really doing things unsurprisingly way faster. But we
I
are
want to talk about that because you have that on your website. This is not a 9 to 5, and I think, look, as a founder, I completely agree. But like, how do you think about that when a lot of the companies you might be competing against in the future or even now are bigger than you and have more money than you? Like, how do you get leverage on what you guys are doing, not just from the hours, or is that a big part of it too?
Yeah, I mean, like part of it's like this complex things about doing things efficiently and doing things the right way. But I think part of it's just moving faster, and that's just like moving hard hours, and it's just like part of it's just doing, the YC axiom of don't do things that don't scale is like very true, because like look, like some of the cities I've been in this fall have been Cleveland, Omaha, Raleigh, and like Sacramento. And I don't think anyone from like a bigger company wants to go to Omaha that often, right? And it's just like doing those things and that person being willing to put that extra effort, that extra push in really helps. Obviously you should. What I am opposed to and what we have realized is like you shouldn't be making up work for yourself and doing work for the sake of doing work. And like that's just like we're not micromanaging like when you're in the office. Like if there's work to be done and you can push the ball forward though, it's always an opportunity to do that with more hours, I think.
How have you guys found the ability to like figure out if someone is willing to take ownership, someone's willing to kind of not be micromanaged? Like, how do you test for that? Do you guys have a process for it? Do you look
Yeah.
for that in the resume?
Yeah. For me, I've split it into look, I think one dirty secret with engineering hiring is that no one tells you is just that like it's hard enough to find people that are good engineers and then like any positive attributes on beyond that are like a huge positive and like especially at the early stage. So I think the couple things I will show you, at least we look for, is like we'll always have an onsite with anyone we hire because I think there's little indicators during the course of an onsite where we've designed like an ambiguous task and it's purposefully ambiguous and like we want to kind of see how people perform on that because it's about as realistic as it can be to a real day in the life of the job. And that's one thing. The second thing is just like really good reference checks. People say this and then they don't really back channel. They don't really like talk and ask the right questions to someone's old manager. They're never going to tell you if someone's good or bad, but you can ask for specific examples that really map to ambiguousness and like, tell me about a time you just put this person in a situation and, they didn't really have any context and like, how did they perform? What did they do well? What did they do badly? Because you're asking for specific examples, it's hard to lie on those questions, even if the person is a positive reference. And so I think those are the two big things we can do. Um, but, we're still at the early stages. It's hard to say that our hiring philosophy is like a winning one. And I'm sure there's a lot that I'm going to discover over the course of the next couple of years that we don't know today.
Are there things from your previous companies that you want to bring over or you actively want to reject from their hiring process or their culture?
I want to be careful here, not to say about past employers. Look, I think like Instacart, I had this, manager Sri who hired me, and the way he built out the team was really interesting because he wouldn't look for an archetype of one role. He would look for like, how a team fits together. So he would do things like we were a biz ops team. He would hire someone who's an ex-consultant, an ex-banker, and then someone who came from startups so that you have someone who moves nimble and has a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, someone who can kind of bring polish to that work, and then someone who can manage the cross-functional relationships. So I think like, what that really taught me is like there's not one archetype you want for one role. You kind of want to see how the collection of talent fits together. And that's vastly underrated because you're almost trying to hire, at least from what I've seen from tens of thousands of interviews, like you want to hire for strengths and like peaks on strengths as opposed to like trying to fix weaknesses. And if you can kind of have different strengths in different people and they fit together well, I think that's like one underrated thing that I learned from Instacart. Also,
Do you feel like that's maybe a thing that bigger companies can do, but you guys might not have the ability to kind of recreate that at your size? Or can you still do it, do you think?
yeah, it's interesting. I think it's just like you're looking for a different set of traits, right? Like you're not looking for, cross-functional stakeholder relationships. You're looking for like this person really hustles. This person's like a really great strategic thinker. This person has experience in our space. You're just looking for a different set of attributes and spikes than I think that you would at a big company. At a big company, there's things like communication skills and like not that our folks don't communicate, but like like communication skills and like ability to manage upwards. And those are strengths that we just don't have to care about at this stage.
That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, let's talk about the culture. So one of the definitions I really like about culture are the behaviors that you reward and the behaviors that you punish. So what are those for you guys? Or what do you want them to be, maybe?
Yeah, it's funny. I think we only have like two key traits. One is like have that dog in you. And really what that means is just like go that extra mile, be willing to be aggressiveness. I think is very, very undervalued at a startup. You can talk yourself out of doing a lot of things because you're going to get it wrong. And you just have to be ultra aggressive is kind of my point of view. And that's the one trait I've seen across every successful founder is just like you got to just be aggressive, like in everything you're doing, whether that's sales or pushing product, and you're going to be wrong a lot. And so we look for that trait in people. So we look for aggressiveness, intensity. I think the thing that gets lost though with those two traits is, and like people are surprised to hear Shrey and I say that because we don't take ourselves super seriously. Like, I don't think I'm Steve Jobs, right? Like, I think we're capable of building a really great company, but it's not like we think we're like extremely, extraordinarily smart people. We're just kind of here having a fun time, like trying to make money in a successful company. And like, one of the traits we look for is like you don't take yourself too seriously, even if the work itself is very serious. And making that delineation where it's just like, you can crack a joke or make fun of the state of the company or something like that is like, it's super helpful because like part of it is the journey and you want to be around people that are like easy to get along with and like aren't like, if they're make a mistake or, someone cracks a joke at their expense, like they're not getting super upset about it and then you have to like manage it and it's just a whole mess. So we look for people that don't take themselves seriously, even if they take the work relatively seriously.
That makes sense. You're spending a lot of hours with these people, right?
Yeah.
And you guys are on site, right, in New York?
We're on site. We've increasingly kind of been open to remote engineering hiring. But one of the funniest statistics I like to throw out is like there's only 4,000 engineers in the New York City area that have worked between 1 and 8 years and have like worked at a company under 10,000 people. So you're competing with every single big company, every single startup from C to Series E for like a pool of 4,000 people, some of whom might not even be available. So it's like if you're in New York, you kind of have to start to open yourself up to a little bit of remote culture, or you have to beg your single friends in SF to move to New York by like pitching them like the opportunity to come. And like, that's literally the two best hiring strategies that I've seen for startups.
So you moved from SF. I saw that on your LinkedIn. I also moved from SF many years ago. What was your reason to?
So I only lived in SF for a year. So
Okay,
I started in New York. I'm from Jersey. I've been in
I
New
see.
York the
Okay,
majority of my career. Shrey moved from SF, and he claims the reason is because he followed me out here, and I convinced him to do
I
it.
see.
I don't think it's true. I think that Shrey secretly loves New York and really just wanted to move here.
That's fair. So
Yeah.
when you're pitching a candidate to work at Wayfaster, how do you tell them why is Wayfaster a great place to work?
Yeah. It's a combination of three things. One is huge market. Look, like recruiting is crowded, and I always say we're not building a recruiting company. We're building a labor company. And there's a huge amount of surface area we can cover. So the opportunity is there. It is just kind of an execution problem and being smart about product and good market. Second is extreme ownership. We kind of believe that me and Trey are hiring for people that can correct us, have the ability to really handle ambiguous tasks, and they can cover as much surface area as they want around engineering, product, sales. We don't believe in swim lanes, generally speaking. And then the third one is just like a good culture of like high intensity where you're going to do great work. You're going to have fun with the people around you. Like I said, we don't take ourselves super seriously. And I think like just having a good culture where you can come into work, you're, happy about the work you're doing. It's interesting work, I think is like really appealing to a lot of people who are kind of used to the bureaucracy of like bigger companies, startups that are run like dictatorships. Like I think it's just an interesting opportunity for a lot of people for those reasons.
How do you guys think of yourselves differently for companies that are kind of similar size and stage? Like what's the pitch if you're deciding between two startups of relatively the same size?
Yeah, it's very rare, and like I've actually very rarely seen like people make that seed to seed startup transition because I think one of the things, and maybe you guys see this at AngelList, is like it's hard to know if someone's been at a startup for 6 months or a year and they're like, you know, looking to leave one seed stage startup and move to another. It's a really hard thing to kind of tell, and so our sourcing very much doesn't really pick those types of people up. I would say when it comes to startup, like I don't have a great strategy of competing against other startups for talent because I think so much of it is going to be dependent on, what you think of the market or the product that the company's going after and like how much you like the team. And unfortunately, for better or worse, like Shrey and I are close to 30. So I don't know if we're changing that much. And I think like for the product, at least the very least, like the product is like kind of in a not final form, but it's like the market and like the types of problems so we're going after are pretty set. So I would say like that's very up to the candidate and who they are and like the type of person they are and how well they mesh with the team and the product. And it's not something we can really control.
Given that you guys are small, given that it's a lot of getting to know you guys, is there
Yeah.
stuff that you guys do in the process to help that move along better?
Yeah, we both interview every candidate, whether it's a business or engineering, just to make sure that they get along with both of us. And we generally take every candidate we're serious about out to lunch, always in the same place in Fidei, because we love it and it's relatively nice and it's a good lunch spot. Westville, if anyone wants to know,
We
but
used to go to Westville all the time. That was like the Angelus spot in our New York office.
yeah,
We went to the one in Chelsea, but yeah,
it's a great recruiting spot.
yeah.
But so we go out and we, go out to lunch and we try to understand like I think part of it is just understanding like the why for a candidate, which is like why are you interested in this startup? Like what about your job right now is it fulfilling? And sometimes you don't really have to dig that deep where it's like I work at Google and I'm like, cool, like I think you've said enough. I understand what your why is here. But I think sometimes it's a lot deeper for someone who maybe has as a former founder, maybe is like 5 or 6 years into their career, trying to understand what interests them, how they'll fit with the team. If it's like a painful hour-long discussion where we both feel drained out of it, even if the candidate's great, we're like I don't know if that's something we want to do. So those are kind of the key points in the process that we have.
What are some ways that candidates can really stand out that they might not be doing right now?
Well, one is, and I will say this across the board for any candidate anywhere in the history of the world, based on the fact that we run a recruiting companies, please do not generate a chat GPT type email or cover letter. Please don't do it. We can all tell. Every company can tell. I don't know why you're doing it, but please stop. But I would say like for us standing out, like look, like all the jobs I've gotten have been like I put together like some type of like extra work analyzing like a company's market or their strategy or something that would be useful for them and show that like I thought and cared about the company. The amount of people who've done that and like not gotten a job in like the startup they want to work for, like one of the five startups that they've worked for, which is like if I worked here, here's what I would do, and they just put something like that together. Like I've seen those people get jobs like 60-80% of the times. It might not be your first company, but it'll be like one of the companies 1 through 5 on the list. So just sit down, write 5 companies down, and figure out how you can like kind of show them what you would do if you were in the role, especially for business and product type roles, I would say specifically.
Makes sense. What are your contrarian takes or maybe your unconventional takes around being a founder, hiring, building a business, anything like that?
Yeah, there's this like Keith Raboy axiom of like find undervalued talent. And one of the things nobody tells you about finding undervalued talent is that most talent in the market is properly valued, especially anyone who's more than like 3-ish years out of school. Like no one tells you like there's an age limit to finding
No, he
undervalued
did do
talent.
that. He posted,
Yeah.
there was something where he's like, don't hire anyone over 30. So he's starting to say it, but not 3 years. I guess this would be 25.
Look, we hire people over 30.
I'm
It's just
not
like
trying
I
to get
think
you
they're
in trouble.
properly like
Yeah.
please don't get us sued. But I think there's just like a thing where when we were early on in the engineering process, we were like trying to find like these diamonds in the rough. And I think that, you know, it's useful, but at the same time, like it's a very draining process because you're talking to a lot of people that are completely underqualified and like you have to have some sort of heuristic for like and be able to write that down on like what diamond in the rough actually means for you guys. It's not actually something where it's like seeing is believing, and you're just hoping to get surprised and you talk to the right person and it's there. You have to kind of have a systemic way of understanding like what that actually means to you guys. Like, do they spike on X, Y, and Z scale? Do they have this type of open source contribution? So that's one I would say we found when it comes to hiring. And then the second is just that like we were so slow in hiring, man. And like we are now like fastly building out the team, but we took so long to hire like our first couple employees and it hurt us very, very badly. Because the reality is like either the thing you're building is working or it's not. And if it starts to work and you don't have people, Nobody tells you how, and like you hear all about these like capital efficient companies, and that's amazing. And like, I hope someone becomes a billionaire with a 2% engineering team, like allegedly happens on Twitter. But nobody tells you the opposite side, which is like if you start to pick up momentum in the business and you only have a couple people, you are so incredibly fucked in most cases, and you like are just scrambling to hire and have to take a step back from like everything else you're doing to spend like 50, 75% of your time recruiting. And I wish someone had just told me like, yeah, man, like it's been 4 months since you hired someone. Like, please go hire some people, especially as the amount of work scales. And so I think that's been a very unfortunate learning lesson for my November.
What do you think caused that? Was it this idea that like we're hiring kind of another founder basically, or close enough to it that you wanted perfection? Or why do you think you went slowly? Because it seems like one of the values that you had also before was like aggressiveness, right? Like we got to move fast. So what happened here?
Yeah, it's one of those things where as a founder, like there's two things. One is like you feel like you always want to be in a perfect spot before you hire, where you're like, oh, like when we have product market fit and we're ready to scale. And like the reality is like a lot of the times like having those people in the room can help you experiment faster. That's why you see like second time founders raise a little bit more money and like build out teams before even like launching a product. So that's one of them. I think the second is just like it's so easy to get caught up in like just the day to day of doing things that you tell yourself you're going to recruit and then you have three bad interviews and then you're just
Right.
like, you know, I'll do this later. And I think you just have to kind of keep pushing. I think is kind of the thing.
Uh, Last question before we go. As we
Yeah.
head into 2025, what's next for you guys?
We're hiring to keep up with growth. I mean, the company is growing incredibly fast. We've seen like a lot of early stages of like clear product market fit. I think for us, we tell every candidate at the very least we have an wildly ambitious product roadmap here that we need to get built out. Some of it customers will respond to, some of it customers won't. But we are building out new products beyond just like our core voice evaluation engine. And of course, we're making that really good, but we have ambitions that go a lot beyond that. And we need really great people to kind of take ownership and build a bunch of 0 to 1 products as well as scale our existing go to market and product. And so it's going to be a really fun year. Have cut back on the number of energy drinks I'm drinking as we've hired people. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Varun. It's really awesome to hear about what you guys have been building. And if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about Wayfaster, where should they go?
Yeah, you can go on our website. You can feel free to email me directly. And we have a little clever engineering. I think it's clever, but it's called we'rehiringanengineer.com. And so you can go on there and it's not, I'll be honest, the impetus for us putting up that site is to showcase a little bit of our personalities and like what working at Wayfaster is like. But it's also partially the fact that I don't know how to use Notion and everyone puts up a Notion careers page and I'm like, what is a block? Like, do I put a bullet or do I not? And so, like, that's our hiring site for engineering as well.
I saw it. It was really cool. So, yeah, definitely check it out. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you taking the time. We'll talk soon.